Hello, everybody. Good morning and good evening to those of us who are joining from the UK or Australia. Just going to give a couple of seconds just to kind of let people join from the lobby and come into the main room, and then we will kick things off, as I'm very conscious of everybody's diaries and also kind of evening kind of plans as well. So we will get going just in a moment, just to give, as I say, a little bit of time for more people to join. But yeah, I guess just in the interest of making sure that we keep to time, as I say, we've got a jam-packed session for you today. We will kick off. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Abby Lamb, and I'm an associate partner at WithYouWithMe, and I'm joined by Gina Mybush, who is the Chief R&D Officer from the Art of Mentoring, waving there. And we are both really happy to have you here today as we explore a topic that is front of mind for many leaders at the moment, which is exploring the ways that we can future-proof the workforce amidst a constant backdrop of change. So just to let you know, we are kind of recording this session to make sure that we can circulate a copy to you and to anyone who couldn't make it. So you should see that pop up that we are recording. And in terms of what you can expect today, we've got you for the next 3/4 of an hour, and we're going to make sure that it's a very full and productive session for you this morning. So I'm going to kick things off with a bit of an introduction into what skills-based workforce management is and why it's suddenly on the radar for most organizations, kind of in terms of finding and closing skills gaps. And then we're going to explore some of the strategies for how to bridge those skills gaps. And Gina is going to take us through a closer look at the role that mentoring plays in these strategies. And then we're going to welcome our truly extraordinary guests from Amazon Web Services, Lace Partners, and BAE Systems, who are going to share how their organizations are tackling this challenge. So if you have a question throughout this evening, please feel free to drop it into the chat. If we have time, we will run through them. But if we don't, we will make sure that we reach out to you individually to answer your queries. And now I do see some names that I know on the list of people coming in, but there are some newcomers. So just ahead of us kicking off, Gina and I will give a quick snapshot of our organisation. So Gina, over to you.
I remember to unmute myself. That's a first. Thanks very much for the intro, Abby, and welcome everybody. It's lovely to see you here this morning in the UK and this evening in Australia. Look, Art of Mentoring are delighted to be working with you, with me, on presenting these webinars. We see, a lot of really great stories coming from organisations such as BAE Systems Australia. Hi, Monique, who's a lovely person that I work with quite a lot in putting in mentoring programs. And we focus on structured mentoring programs, helping organisations to identify mentors and mentees who can really benefit from working together. And we provide them with a journey, a structured guided journey that they can move together to achieve the mentees' goals. And of course, that moves them toward the organisation goals. So what we specialise in really is making sure we understand what the organisation wants, creating an atmosphere with the mentee and mentor can identify the mentee's needs. And we do that with a software program, a platform of our own, such that these programs can scale up. We've got some quite big programs now. And, I guess a key part of what we do is making sure that people don't turn up to their first meeting not having any idea what to expect. We give them really effective training and also support resources, worksheets, that kind of thing. So we're very careful about making sure that we measure the outcomes and the impacts of the mentoring programs so that we can feed them in and make sure that the next year's program is even more effective. So, as I'll speak to later on, we see a really great collaboration, I guess, with the skills-based approach, because, mentoring is that customized one-on-one support for each less experienced person in the organisation who's looking to develop new skills and capabilities. So thanks so much, Abby. I'll hand it back to you, but really looking forward to hearing what you've got to say.
Lovely. Thank you, Gina. So yeah, and just a little bit on WithYouWithMe. So we are a global HR tech company, and we work with organizations to solve the skills challenge end to end. So we've got a tech platform that organizations use to create skills frameworks that outline the exact skills that their organization needs, so both at an enterprise and a role level, in order to meet their goals. And we map their existing workforce to show what capabilities are already in place and where there is untapped potential. And then we use this powerful useful data to guide organisations on how they can then close these gaps through either hiring, targeted upskilling, or great mentorship programs like the Art of Mentoring. So now that you know who we are, let's get stuck into it. And I'd like to start by setting the scene on why we're here, really. So we all know that the world of work is changing and it's causing systemic productivity issues for most organisations. And I imagine that's why some of you are here today. And in many organisations, you'll find that the skills gap isn't just an HR problem anymore. It's a critical organisation-wide risk. And with the rise of AI and rapid tech transformation, the skills that are required to perform most roles are evolving faster than organisations can actually keep pace with. So in the face of such rapid change, how can we prevent that inevitable workforce skills gap from occurring? And alongside this, how can we keep our teams and our people motivated and engaged and growing in the direction that a company needs? So this is really the problem that has driven the widespread adoption of a skills-based approach to workforce management. Now, I'd like to dig into a concept to start with that some of you may already know, and that is the concept of a skills half-life. And it's really a way of thinking that underpins everything around how we need to think about skill management and employee growth. And it's essentially a measure used to describe how long a specific skill remains useful before it starts to become outdated. So if a skill has a half-life of 5 years, that means that in 5 years, about half of the knowledge or abilities related to that skill are going to need to be updated or refreshed to stay relevant. Now, as you can see on the right, the half-life of skills is getting shorter and shorter. And that's because of the incredible acceleration of technology, obviously, particularly AI. And the average worker today will need to reskill 9 times, and those with the most fungible skills as frequently as every 3 years. Now, that rate of change is only expected to increase. And by 2030, we're looking at a skill half-life as short as 2 years. So I wanted to start by explaining this skills half-life view, as it's one of the primary factors that is contributing to the national skills shortage that we're seeing. And it's a problem that traditional training approaches just can't solve. So we need to be thinking about our people and our workforces differently. Now, I've popped some stats up on the screen that illustrate the broader landscape, but I want to highlight the first one in particular, which is the fact that we're now in a world where almost all corporate jobs require digital skills. We know that technology is becoming increasingly accessible and it's impacting more and more roles. And a great example of this is a project that we've recently done actually with the Australian Army. And this looked at the impact of automation and augmentation on the Army's workforce over the next 15 years. And we found that almost 50% of the entire workforce will be affected by both automation and augmentation. And more than 20% of roles are expected to interact with augmented technologies, which would give a 30% capacity gain for the workforce. So what does this mean? Well, it means that more than half of the Army's workforce are going to need to upskill to be able to use new technologies as part of their existing roles, or they're going to need to reskill into another area in instances where parts of their role have been automated. Now, I can guarantee you that this scenario is not isolated to just the Australian Army. It's happening at different scales across all of our workforces. So, as HR leaders, where do we start in moving our organisations in the right direction? And I think it starts first with shifting how we think about the problem. Now, I'm not going to run through all of these because I'm conscious of time, but the most important for me are about the fact that top one, we need to adopt an agile, growth-oriented mindset about career pathways in and around our organisation, which is a huge shift to how organisations have looked at this in the past, but it is imperative that we take this view moving forward. We also need to stop thinking about just a skills gap, and we need to start thinking about reducing skills lag. Gaps are finite, but roles and skills are constantly evolving. So how can we keep people moving forward and keeping pace, and how can we reduce that lag? And finally, when we're closing those skills lags, we need to be considering the spectrum of tools and the people who are available to us to do this. It's not about just putting people on a training course, as we all know. So instead, we need to make sure that we're creating tailored pathways and that we're seeking out diverse experiences and perspectives in order to guide growth and agility in our workforce. So there are two parts that we're really going to drill down into today. How do you get a view of the skills that you have versus the skills that you need? And how can you build that capability in a really meaningful and effective way? So first up, let's start with how an organisation can get ready for a skills-based approach and implement actionable and practical steps to have their people keeping pace with the skills that they need. Now, at WithYouWithMe, we've seen a skills-based workforce program bring significant value and ROI across the enterprise, and that's from reducing the cost of hiring, building engagement, improving retention. And the key to achieving these benefits is ensuring that you have skills as a thread across the employee lifecycle. And we use a process to do this, which we call the 3 Cs, which covers off clarity, capability, and closure. So let's just expand on these a little bit and explain what they mean. So the first step is to achieve clarity on the skills needed to execute your organization's strategy successfully. What are the actual skills that are needed for specific jobs or projects? And a great place to start here is to create a skills framework, which may sound complex and intimidating, but it can be as simple as translating your traditional job descriptions into skills. So both the technical skills, but also those all-important soft skills that are needed in the workforce as well. And by doing that, you then have a universal language across the organization. Looking at your workforce in this way provides leaders with a view of the capability that they need to achieve their organisation objectives. But it also gives a really clear, succinct signal to employees about the skills that they need to build within their role. Next, we focus on assessing capability. So what are the skills that your employees currently have? And there are many ways you can go about doing these assessments, but we typically recommend a combination of employee self-assessment with manager confirmation as well. And we think that's really important to have this dual approach because it ensures a consensus on the real state of play in terms of the existing capability. And this is also where we believe understanding employee potential really comes into play as well. What are the skills your people could naturally thrive at learning? If we can understand cognitive ability and learning preference and psychometrics, we can then map this to skills to understand what someone's going to enjoy learning, how they can best learn it. And we can give kind of real quick wins to get started on closing those skills gaps, which is so important for maintaining motivation in your workforce. And that brings me to the last part of the process, the final C, which is closure, where you can start to put really personalised and targeted plans in place to close skills gaps with your people. So that could either be within their current positions, if there is a gap, or it could be for future positions or business requirements. So just to show you how it all pieces together and bring it to life a little bit, here's a view of this skills-based workforce process in action as it relates to the organisation as well as to the employee. So starting off, we have that clarity phase where we have the organisation understanding the skills demand. So what are the skills that they need? And the individual getting real clarity around the expectation of skills for their role. We then move to capability, where we skills map the workforce. So we now have an understanding of the existing capabilities and where there might be gaps or opportunities to upskill and grow. And our closure process means we've identified the gaps that need to be addressed and we can start to build a strategy for how we're going to tackle it. Now, there are many different strategies that can be introduced to address closure. It could be hiring new talent in. It could be growing the existing workforce through learning such as mentoring. It could be on-the-job training. It could be short courses that you might already have access to. And in some cases, it might even be looking to automation to fill gaps, or you may need to restructure. But the most important part of skills-based workforce management is that you have the data from which you can then make that choice around how best to close your gap. So this is where you can then start to align your various HR initiatives and approaches in a much more meaningful way to the organisation strategy. What are the skills we need? And what are the programs that we're going to turn to take us there? And so that you can kind of see this end-to-end experience for an organisation, we're going to delve a little bit deeper into the example of mentorship. So I'm going to pass over to Gina at this stage, who is going to walk us through this. Over to you, Gina.
Thanks so much. I'm going to do something a bit naughty here and see if I can skip back a couple of slides from where I am, because there's actually a really interesting I'd like to draw on this one about the shift in thinking that's required and why mentoring can play an important role in this, because all of these new ways of thinking that we're talking about on the right-hand side here are certainly features that we are seeing all the time in mentoring experiences, and I'm sure Monique's going to agree with me. In the type of career growth opportunity that mentoring can bring is unquestionably agile. One of the things that mentoring does is gives less experienced people access to more experienced people so that they can get, real time what they require, training and support, helping to embed their learning in real time, one-on-one tailored growth. So it's certainly agile in the sense that you're not having to wait for curriculum changes or, redesign training. There's that really real-time agile way of helping your less experienced people to embed their learning. And that also then feeds back to that idea that there's no lag. It's happening really quickly. And because we've got mentors and mentees meeting frequently, you're getting that correction, that adjustment, that feedback and encouragement happening all the time, such that there's really quick upskilling of your mentees. And again, dynamic skills match. So if there's changes needed in the direction that a mentee is going, the mentor is there to help them. So at Art of Mentoring, we really perceive mentoring as being a journey between two people where they work on the less experienced person's needs. And, what it really does is turbocharge your human resources, support resources, I guess. You've actually got a one-on-one customized coach for each of your people in the form of their mentor. So very targeted, very much about supporting them on their learning journey forward. And the really beautiful, conversations that they have around these learning journeys that they take give the mentees access to all sorts of different perspectives, different levels of experience, people from different parts of the business, from different cultural and linguistic backgrounds, for example. So we often see really great matching going on across organisational boundaries and across silos within the organisation, so that you're really getting the differences in perspectives. We believe that similarities are important for helping a mentor and a mentee to connect and to develop rapport, but it's the differences in the right mindset, in that growth mindset that Abby talked about, that enables mentees to change and grow. And the really beautiful thing about it, of course, is that the mentors develop an incredible amount of new skill and empathy and a new way of seeing what's happening in their workplace through the eyes of a more junior person. So I just really wanted to emphasize that the things that Abby has talked about with regard to the shift in thinking that we need, this nimbleness, this customization, this real-time, targeted, diverse type of skill development is what mentoring brings. So I'm going to shuffle us forward through, but while I'm doing that, I'm going to make sure that our special guests have all got their cameras on, because I'm going to introduce you to our three speakers. We're very, very privileged, and I'm very appreciative of their time tonight. But and I'm actually going to introduce them in reverse order. So let me just find so that I don't make any mistakes here. First of all, Pavan Bilku, who is currently the Director of HR Transformation and a talent expert at Lace Partners. Pavan's got 15 years of experience in people-related transformation strategies and is dedicated to enabling businesses to better attract, develop and retain talent in this, we know, increasingly competitive market. She's got a great track record of working globally with businesses to transform their people experience, new operating models, new technology, services and processes to become more strategic and particularly that value-driven approach. So we're going to come back to Pav toward the end, but I'm also delighted to welcome and introduce Monique Thompson. As I said, I know Monique as one of our clients at Art of Mentoring. She also has international experience, more than 3 decades, in fact, in identifying skills needs and helping to close these through talent identification and recruitment. Monique's worked with Holden, Executive Careers, Thompson, Hudson and Beyond Bank, and is now at BAE Systems Australia. And I know that BAE Systems has a very big presence in the UK, originated there, I believe. This terrific organisation, I'm a little bit biased, because it's a client of Art of Mentoring. We've been working together for a couple of years now, running that program, and Monique's been building this really powerful coaching and mentoring presence in that organisation. So I'm really proud and excited to share with you the experience she's had shifting that culture in BAE. You know, people are working and communicating and collaborating across boundaries in a really sort of positive and rewarding way. First speaker that we're going to be hearing from is someone who I really treasure every conversation I have with, Matthias. They go for a bit long because we get so caught up in them, but I'm looking forward to hearing what he's going to share with us again today. Matthias has contributed to learning and development strategy and execution at the exec level in Australia and internationally for more than 25 years with Deloitte Consulting, Bupa, Korn Ferry, Accenture, and now Amazon Web Services. I know from our conversations that Matthias is really thinking deeply about the growth of AI and the impact that this is having on the world of work and the world in general. And this really interesting conversation that I'm in the middle of with him, I'm going to open you up to it now. I just can't wait for that to continue. Just a reminder, if you've got any questions for Matthias or Monique or Pav, please pop them in the chat box, and at an appropriate time we'll see if we can make sure they're answered. But if not, we're going to follow up. So I'm going to begin by going to Matthias and asking about that skills gap, particularly centred around AI that we've discussed and that you presented about at the last webinar that we held on this topic. You know, what are you seeing there? What do you think we really need to be aware of? What are you foreseeing? What are you already seeing? What's of interest to you? Why has it whet your appetite? Thanks, Matthias.
Hi, Gina, and hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Good evening from Melbourne. Yeah, so it's a really interesting question there, and I think everyone has probably been tinkering around a bit with Gen AI, so ChatGPT, playing around, putting like silly questions in there. But this is something that will keep us very, very busy in the upcoming years. And from a skills perspective, what we see emerging at the moment, there's a prevalent set of tech skills, which is almost obvious, like the entire AI, ML, deep learning, Python programming, prompt engineering, LLM model, so large language model optimization, and so on. But what's almost very often not on the radar when I talk to CIOs, CTOs, but also HR leaders, is the entire soft skills remit that almost everyone in an organization needs to have. And that starts with ethics. So when we talk about the use of AI and the risk that AI brings at the moment, ethics and critical thinking are the most prevalent skills that are missing at the moment, that no one had really on the on paper anywhere. Creativity, critical thinking, problem solving, and I would go one step further and say it's not problem solving anymore. We got a Gen AI now to solve problems for us. What we need to create is problem finding. So that's not problem orientation. It's identifying where we have problem inefficiencies and then applying AI to use and solve that. And these are the major gaps that we are seeing at the moment. Especially the interpersonal skills or the softer skills like critical thinking and ethics and EQ. They are the ones that are also on top of that hard to generate. So it's not like you send someone to a 2-day training and they are super emotional, intelligent, or they are super critical thinkers. That's the problem. They rank on the Korn Ferry Leadership Architect scale for developmental difficulty altogether as with a high difficulty ranking. Means they are really hard to create. And you also don't find them in the market, right? So that's from a skill perspective, what we are seeing, what I'm observing, and what I think is really critical to get this AI ball rolling, and it will roll sooner or later. Yeah. At the moment, we hear, and you probably read a couple of critical articles, and so we know Gen AI is leaving us behind expectations, and we thought more. I think it's not Gen AI, it's us, because there's still so much questions around governance, risk and compliance questions that hold AI back at the moment. I talked to a friend yesterday who works for another tech company, a slightly competitor company. Their HR department is actually holding back on Gen AI initiatives because they fear a massive impact on the workforce, and they don't want to be seen as the ones who offer this technology and then sack 5,000 people. Yeah, that's, I think, quite interesting. Now, there's a couple of things I came across. One is, especially for our friends in the UK, interesting. The Open University released a study a couple of weeks ago about productivity in the UK. So you guys have a similar to us in Australia productivity issue at the moment. Main reasons for productivity, lack of productivity, was lack of skills, with 24%, and tech adoption, 16%. Yeah, there we go. Same thing. AWS and Access Economics did a study earlier this year that states 73% of all employers don't know how to implement AI training. They don't know where to start or what to do. 75% cannot find the talent. And it also states that more than 70% of people are actually quite keen to learn. So now we have a funny situation, right? The first time in my L&D career, actually people want to learn something, which is amazing. And we don't have anything on stock to offer them. And yet we are staring into a gaping hole of skills that are missing. And then especially over here, also, you know, you're a bit better off. You can dip into other resource pools. Over here, we rely heavily on immigration, which hampers the entire development.
Yeah, I know, Matthias, we've talked about that whole idea of intentionality and closing that gap, you know, and we've got both a problem, as you said, in finding people and also giving them the right material. What are the kind of key things that you can see happening if we're not very, very careful and intentional about how we close that gap? I know we've talked a little bit before about where, you know, where is AI fed from, and what does it mean if we don't diversify the points of view that come into that?
So the entire idea of AI is obviously to elevate our work, right? So if we do it right, if you get it implemented in a humanistic way, yeah, it should help us, which means it augments tasks that we are doing that are not particularly value driven. So if let's say I can augment 80% of an accountant job, or I can even displace it. The accountant is turning up on Monday and wants to be paid for 5 days, not for 1 day, if I replace 80% of the skills, right? So how do I fill the job of this accountant up? And what skills does the accountant now need to have in order to work productively in tandem with an AI? And we are talking about AI that has a PhD level knowledge, not only in one domain, but across all domains. So that's a very different interaction with the system that I have than what we had before, where I click a couple of SAP buttons or other famous ERP systems, right? The impact is, if you can't keep up, you can't develop these skills fast enough, you will fall behind, because someone else will get it right, and they will have a competitive advantage over you, which means you are less productive, you fall behind innovation, and you can't focus on high value tasks, which gives another one, a different company, a massive advancement in what they can achieve and what they can do. So to sum it up, you will see a bottom line impact, or your Kodak moment. When Kodak says, yeah, we digital, who's doing that? Who has a camera these days? We all got iPhones or whatever.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Matthias. Really interesting perspective. And as I said before, any questions you'd like to put in the chat box there, we'll come back to. I'm going to ask now Monique if she could share with us. As I said before, really proud about the mentoring program, and we would like to kind of bring the conversation around where was BAE in the sense of making this decision to bring in something like a mentoring program, someone like you who's specialised in the area, coming from that recruitment and skills gap closing background? Put your mind back to the time when we were conceiving the program at BAE. What was going on? What were the drivers, the pain points, the gaps, the opportunities? Thanks very much, Monique.
Well, Gina, as you know, we're on our second program now with you. So the first one went okay. Hello from Adelaide, South Australia. Good evening. So BAE Systems, you may know of us in the UK. You certainly have a few people that work for us over there. We're one of the world's most advanced technology-led defence and aerospace plus security solutions company. We've got a very skilled workforce, but without a doubt, we have to build that workforce quite dramatically, because one of the biggest industries we have in Australia right now is defence. And our company is certainly one that's got to meet that capability gap. So looking back to how it originated, which is the question, we did a survey through McKinsey. We used their services, and it came up with a request from our people for more career development. And career development within our organisation is essential because our people are highly skilled, and if we lose those people, we have to replace them, and we want to retain those people. So we set about developing our people in lots of different ways, and offering some career development areas. And we're certainly looking at a capability framework and job architecture, but without a doubt, mentoring was the gap for us. So we spoke to the art of mentoring, and Gina was very involved in supporting us. And we designed a program that was very well received by the business. And the pilot program incorporated certainly quite a lot of our workforce, across our whole workforce. In fact, they were able to apply. And if you look at the outcome we were trying to achieve, it was a cross-pollination of people within different areas of the business. So, we weren't matching people within their own area. That was futile. And, I had people say things which was really great, like, a mentor saying, I learned to listen more, which I just love, and I quote all the time because I just think leaders saying that is so special. And mentees and mentors saying, wow, I didn't know how hard it was to work in operations. So people started to understand different areas of the business. They got to see what went on there, and they certainly enjoyed the process, and it was very well received.
And I remember some of the feedback that we got, around some of these skills that Matthias was talking about, an understanding of the actions that people are taking in the bigger kind of context of the organisation's strategy, but also these things around, as you said, about emotional intelligence, listening skills, interpersonal skills. What's been the sort of standout for you in what's been achieved in the first year, Monique? What jumps out for you, a piece of feedback or something like that you might have heard that really makes you think that you've succeeded?
Look, the second program showed us we succeeded the first time around. We had an influx of people applying, but we also know that you can't put a price on an individual, and you can't put data on it either, understanding their own selves. And I think people understanding what their drivers are, the motivations are, and where they want to be in the future. So that was a real success for us, people understanding themselves better. And we want to retain those people. We have a lot of jobs to offer up in the future. So I think if we think about I agree with the emotional intelligence, aspect. A leader needs to be emotionally intelligent. And I think the quote, I learned to listen more, that sort of thing. And also, I think soft skills can't be underestimated. So it's an engagement exercise, but it's also around, here I am now, where I want to be in the future, and what's the gaps. And I have to own my career, but I have to be proactive. And I think a mentor offers that experience advice to say, this was what I went through, and our people loved it.
Yeah, it's great. The feedback about engagement and people's excitement, and they're feeling that they're in the driver's seat of their own career as well. And being able to show them those opportunities within the organisation is really exciting to hear. Yeah. Thanks so much, Monique. Really, really love hearing feedback about the program. And of course, last but not least, Pav, it's great to have you here. Thank you for joining us on this webinar. Monique's talked about, back in the days when the decision was made by BAE Systems Australia to implement mentoring. You have got a lot of experience in all sorts of skills-based programs, and organisations like BAE, like anyone that implements a new program, often struggles where to start. And a big part of that, of course, is building the business case, getting the spend, getting the commitment. How can organisations take that first step and build that strong business case, get the enthusiasm and the ownership in the organisation?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Hi from sunny-ish London. It has been wonderful listening to my co-panelists, because I think some of the success stories that Matthias, that Monique have shared already bring to life a really decisive way to start. And I'm going to illustrate how Lace thinks about getting started, but very much linked to, I think, Monique and Matthias, what you've done. So at Lace, we work with a range of clients to build what we call a value case. So it's beyond a business case, it's beyond the maths, as I call it. So we know that the maths is really important to securing investment, but it's also about securing buy-in. And that's why we talk about value and holistic value across the business, but also for individuals. And for skills, building that value case, we find can be slightly more complex, because not all talent leaders have full accountability for the whole talent scope. Not everybody manages everything from talent acquisition to talent management to D&I. And therefore, getting buy-in actually from HR colleagues can be part of the struggle, but it can help you find that solution. So we believe that value case needs to include significant buy-in from the HR population and establishing the common language that is going to filter through everything we talk about skills related. So it's an important step. We shouldn't miss that step. We know that businesses are very much more on board with the skills discussion than some of our HR colleagues. So I think that's where we would get started. Now, we do, as Lace, have a 6-stage framework to building a compelling value case, and you will be glad to know I won't talk through all 6 in detail, because I know that we have questions also from the audience here. So I've distilled them down into 3 things that are really easy places to start. The first, and I think this is very much echoed through Matthias and Monique, is start with the problem. So to create that value case, you should always start with the business problem that you have in mind. Now, that doesn't have to be enterprise-wide. And we find that skills challenges are usually more discrete than that. It's either focused on a particular part of the business, especially if we talk about, how do we tell stories with data? How do we really make sure that we're using AI skills, for example? That could also be at particular levels in the organisation. Monique, you talked about, people wanted more career development. We often find that in certain areas of the business, people with, 7 to 10 years in the organisation, people who are, high potentials. So look at where exactly you're finding those challenges, either from employee feedback. We're massive advocates at Lace for employee experience and listening to your customer, but also look at it from a business lens. You can see where you've got customer retention falling. You can see where you're getting poor feedback from your customers, if that's a metric that you look at. So we find lots of our clients start with a particular area of the business where feedback is the strongest, or where they are encountering a particular business problem. Now, many of us on this call will have heard that organizations often start with their technology functions. They often start with sales functions. And that's because we know that those skill half-lives that Abby mentioned earlier are getting, the challenges facing us today, not in 2030, particularly in tech and in sales organizations where AI is taking a lot of the grunt work. Matthias talked about, that we only need that accountant for 1 day a week. We might only need that salesperson for 1 day a week. So how are we going to design work for them? So we need to start with a really acute business problem, because that helps us build the case. Number two, let's match the right solutions to that business problem. I loved, Abby, on your slide, you had a range of different solutions that you talked about when you talked about closure, mentoring being one of them. But, you know, there are a range of skills-based solutions for everything from skills-based hiring to talent mobility, mentoring being another way of building skills. So you've got to make sure that that business problem is matched to the right solution. Now, some business problems might only need one solution. It could just be skills-based hiring. And that's where, you know, we work quite closely with WithYouWithMe, can create that solution to a problem. But it also might be a range. You might need to solve that problem through skills-based hiring and mentoring so that it is really embedded in your organization. So we encourage our clients to look at that problem and match the right solutions rather than trying to boil the ocean with an all-encompassing skill strategy across all of the pillars of HR. That helps you be really specific, but also realistic about the outcomes that you're expecting. And that brings me on to my third final pillar. And that's about showing the outcomes that you expect. Absolutely, the maths part of that value case, but we also take into account qualitative outcomes that we're expecting. Now, for this, being really outcome focused when it comes to skills, it's a long-term game. We talk about the challenges that are faced in front of us, but it's a long-term investment period. It's a long-term gain, especially when you're reskilling or upskilling all of the time. So what we like to do is we like to look at success indicators as well as success outcomes. What are the micro outcomes that you're expecting? They could be as easy as how many people have logged skills, how have skills been validated in your organization, or they could be more all-encompassing where you have been able to show progress through a pilot exercise, for example. So pilot programs focused on, you know, sales organizations can have some very quick turnarounds with customer feedback and customer retention. So those three things, again, for us, start with the problem. 2, match your solutions to that business problem. And 3, show the outcomes that you expect, both in the short and the long term. A quick start guide, if you were.
Fantastic. Thanks, Pav. Look, it's been a really interesting journey. You know, Matthias was talking to us about what the consequences are, this new scope of problem that we're facing in the type of skills gap and what we need to close it. It's not as simple as it used to be identifying where these skills gap were. Monique, thank you for sharing with us the journey you took and what you've found and experienced. And Pav, I think you've given us a really good, strong, very simple to the point strategy for getting this in front of senior leaders who need to make these decisions. Abby, I'm going to hand it back to you to close, but once again, to our guests, thank you so much for your time this morning, this evening. It's been a really enlightening experience for me to hear you talk, and I'm loving the way we're getting so much similarity and crossover in the stories. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. I feel like there are so many questions to kind of keep on asking, and we're limited by time. And I can see some questions that have been put in the chat, so we'll make sure that we do come back to all of you with answers to those as we are kind of in time to wrap up. And I guess what we wanted to kind of ensure that you guys take away today from the session is we have covered such a large amount of information. We've kind of boiled these down to 4 main points. So firstly, what we want you to take away is that kind of thinking around a skill half-life. That skill half-life has got a real impact on businesses. So please do incorporate this into your thinking and into your forward planning. We've spoke extensively about the adoption of a growth mindset. So how are you laying the foundations to enable sustainable and ongoing workforce growth? The fact that you can start this process, but just by focusing on the skills that are needed for the task to be done. So get that real picture of what you need to do the work today, but also what are you going to need to do for the work of tomorrow. And finally, we have explored and heard about the powerful programs and the important part that mentorship and coaching can have when looking to evolve skills and facilitating employee growth. So Gina, any final words from you before we wrap up?
No, look, we're just to let you know that we will get some answers to those questions. Terrific questions, by the way. And look, we love working all around the globe as well. So hearing these different perspectives, different organisations, different stages of the journey, I've really appreciated your time, everybody on the call this evening. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you all. And if you do want to continue the conversation with us, we'd love to. So you can see our little QR codes on the screen right there. So please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you all again for your time today.